My aunt stole my inheritance. Then karma struck, and her life fell apart. This particular post is 1 year old, and it is one of my favorite ever, so I will read this one to you because there is an update. My aunt was one of 2 kids my grandparents had. My mother was the polar opposite to my aunt. She worked from age of 12 in my grandfather's shop, never asked for anything, and eventually managed to start her own business. My aunt never held down a job till the age of 26, was constantly stealing from her parents, and was constantly in trouble. Despite this, my aunt was spoiled by my grandmother, and so were her kids. She had 3 kids from 3 different men, and her first husband was not one of them, if you know what I mean. Didn't matter what my aunt or her kids did, my grandmother would always jump to their defense. She never had time for my mom and her kids unless it was to get something from us. The only reason my mom would visit her because she loved my grandfather. My grandfather passed away in 2004, and a few months after my nan decided to write up a new will. My mother and my aunt were both present for it when she signed it, so they knew what was in it. It made it so that when she passed away, her home would be sold and the money split 25% each to my mom and aunt, and the remaining 50% would go evenly to the grandkids. At the time, the home was worth more than £500,000, so it would be a nice little inheritance, but nothing life-changing. Just to note, £500,000 is $637,000 US. In 2010, my mom passed away after an accident and did not have a current will in place. As she no longer had her business and was renting a house, she didn't have anything of much monetary value. The only thing she was concerned about was what would be done at her funeral should she have passed away, but had told me everything she wanted: the music, the flowers, the coffin color, and even what people were to wear at the funeral. She wanted people to wear bright, warm colors. So when she passed, my aunt and nan took over all the arrangements and tried to undo all the things I told them. The songs were going to be songs I knew mom didn't like, the flowers were all the wrong colors, and they picked a hideous coffin. With the help of my siblings, we were able to change a few of the things back to what they were supposed to be, but the coffin couldn't be changed for some reason, and my nan refused to let people come dressed as clowns, so it was all black. It was frustrating. After the funeral, my nan had her will changed. My siblings and I were told by our aunt that she did not have any involvement with the writing of the will, and our nan told us that she changed it so that mom's share would go to her kids instead. All good, we thought. After mom passed away, my nan just stopped talking about my mom. At first, we thought it was because she was still recovering from losing her daughter, but even 5 years after mom passed, she still wouldn't talk about her. Even if you brought up a story about mom, nan would very obviously try and change the subject, usually about how hard my aunt and her crappy kids had it. And if you went to talk to her about your own problems, she would somehow bring it back to my aunt. I had suffered a mental breakdown after my mom's passing, so you can imagine how much it hurt to hear, well, X has had it so much worse. In 2016, my nan passed away. She had written down what she wanted to be done for her funeral. And it was basically all the same things she had picked out for my mom's funeral. Even the music to be played. I don't know why she tried to have a dress rehearsal funeral using my mom as the stand-in, but it was obvious that's what she was trying to do. So after a couple of months, our siblings and I were waiting to hear about the will reading. And my aunt kept telling me, oh, it'll be another month before we can do the reading. I didn't mind. I wasn't fussed about the money, to be honest. But my oldest brother was hoping to use the money to pay for a honeymoon for him and his then fiancée, and my younger brother was about to start university, so it would be a heck of a help. Eventually, my dad bumped into the solicitor my grandmother had used to deal with her will and asked what was happening. The solicitor let slip that the will had already been read and that it left everything to my aunt. When my dad questioned this, the solicitor told him that my aunt had been present when the will was written, despite promising that she had nothing to do with it. When confronted, my aunt initially tried to deny, but eventually admitted to lying to all of us. She showed us the will, and it confirmed what we already knew. The house and all its contents were now my aunt's. This included my granddad's war medals. He fought in the Second World War. When I told her that he had promised them to me before he passed away, she said, Well, unless you have it in writing, you will have nothing in this house. Anyway, I already gave them to Clive. My heart sank. Clive, not his real name, obviously, was her eldest son and the dictionary definition of a hack-up. He'd been in and out of prison for stealing and dealing substances. I knew that the moment that prick had got his hands on my granddad's medals, they would have been sold off. We looked into taking her to court over the will, but everyone we spoke to said that we probably wouldn't get anything out of it. She immediately put the house up for sale at close to £750,000, which is almost $1 million US. She had pissed off too many people in our town, so when she was gonna sell the house and move closer to her daughter who lives in a big city, an offer was made on the house and she put down a deposit on a house near the big city. And I thought that was that. Here's where karma comes into play. The people who wanted my nan's house had a survey done on the house to see if there were issues. And oh boy, were there. Turns out that the land the house was built on was way too soft for the type of the house it was, and it was sinking. It has sunk about 2 centimeters in the more than 40 years my nan and granddad had lived there, but the sinking was accelerating to 1 centimeter per year, which is like an inch every 3 years. This meant that within the next 3 years, the house would need some serious work or be knocked down. The new value of the house? £60,000, which is like $76,000. The buyers immediately pulled out, having not even put down a deposit. She couldn't buy her new house, but still had to pay the deposit on it. And while this was happening, she let Clive move in with her into her house that she rented from the council. He wasn't allowed to live in any of the council houses because he had trashed every single one he'd been given. Someone reported this and she was kicked out of her home. She was forced to move into my nan's old home as she couldn't live anywhere else. So there she is, living in a crumbling house with her crab-hat son and her partner. She was stuck there for 2 years. Every time I saw her, she would try and start talking to me, and I would just ignore her and walk off. One time I was walking away, she screamed, "Your mother deserved to pass away for having a prick like you," in the middle of a busy street. Someone reported her to the police, and she had official warning from them and was ridiculed on Facebook. Every time I saw her after that, she looked more and more miserable. Eventually, she sold the house for something like £85,000, which is $108,000, and moved in with her daughter in the big city. I lost contact with her and her kids after this. I thought karma had been issued. Oh, but karma still wasn't done with her. I bumped into one of her former friends and she told me what happened after she left our town. She moved into her daughter's home, let's call her Sue. But they only had a 3-bedroom house and 3 kids. My aunt and her partner had to live in the smallest room in the house while my aunt looked for a job and home to rent. Even with the money from the house, she couldn't afford a home anywhere. After about a month, my aunt's partner ran off after emptying her account. She was left stranded in Sue's house, not contributing anything, because all the money she makes goes into bingo. Eventually, Sue and my aunt get into a screaming match and my aunt said something along with the line of, "I should have gotten rid of you while I was pregnant." Sue immediately kicks her out of her house. So again, there's my aunt in a city where she knows nobody, no money, no home, and the last breed she had a smoldering wreck. Last anyone had heard, she was living in a caravan in the roughest part of the city, and she can no longer work because she's suffering early onset arthritis and can no longer move her hands. I know I shouldn't get joy of something like this happening to another person, but it does bring me some peace as to what happened. Anyway, on to the update. So, when I last left off, my aunt had been left abandoned in a big city and stuck in a caravan with crippling arthritis. By the way, caravan is the British word for trailer house. Well, a few weeks after my first post, I had gotten news that she had somehow found a new boyfriend. How? I don't know, because my aunt had the look and build of an obese pug, and that was when she was in her 30s. So what she looks like now in her mid-60s doesn't bear thinking about. Well, her and her new boy toy, I think I just threw up a little, decided to move to a seaside town and start a new life. Well, you can guess what happened. Boy toy must have gotten sick of her or found out she had no money, so abandoned her. During an argument with her landlord, she suffered a heart attack, and while in hospital, she suffered another. She has recovered but was even more disabled than she was before. She has been given a home by her local council. But it's okay, guys, because Clive has come to live with her. Oh my god, Clive, the hack-up who sold my grandfather's medals and lost my aunt her home. The man is a walking episode of Jeremy Kyle. After my aunt left my hometown, things started to look up for Clive. Someone took a pity on him and gave him a job as laborer. And for a few months he was doing well, looking clean and well. Despite everything that had happened, I was glad he was getting his life back on track. Well, it turns out not. He was given a work van to go from job to job, and one day he came to work with a black eye and no van. He told everyone that he'd been carjacked and the van stolen. Sadly for Clive, they found the van, and a very confused man wondering why the police were arresting him. After the questioning and a text exchange, they found out that Clive had sold the van to the man and gave himself a black eye to make it look like a theft. Clive was arrested. He was massively lucky because his boss did not press charges. The boss told me later that he only did it out of respect of my grandfather, and all the police did was fine for the wasting police time. After burning through all the money he had, he was again homeless. His only lifeline was his younger brother. Let's call him Colin. Colin was in the armed forces and a pretty high rank from what I've heard. Colin was away from home most of the time on deployment, but had managed to buy a nice home in our town. He let Clive live in his house on the agreement that he pay part of the mortgage. You know where this is going. He stopped paying, stopped maintaining the house, and treated it like a substance den. Colin asked him to leave, but Clive used squatters' rights to prevent removal. Because Colin was overseas, he couldn't come back and sort it out and kick him out in person, and had no one in the area to wait for Clive to leave and change the locks behind him. So Clive lived in the house for 6 months. That was until a pissed-off father broke in and beat the crap out of Clive. You see, the father had found out that Clive, who is 41 by the way, had been inappropriately texting and selling devil's grass to a 13-year-old girl. After that, Clive abandoned the house and ran off to mommy. From what I've heard, Colin had stripped the house and is selling it to move closer to his base. We found most of this out from my aunt's daughter Sue, the one who kicked my aunt out. You see, my brother was on holiday in Turkey and just so happened to be in the hotel room next to Sue. She was very apologetic to my brother and thought we might like to know what had happened. She seemed to have a nice life and family and no longer lives in the house that she shared with her mom. I am genuinely happy for her, although I don't think I will try to mend our relationship. Sue had said some spiteful things to me in particular and had never reached out to apologize. I might still feel a little bit bitter for that. As for my aunt, I don't know how to feel. I do hope she gets better and grows enough of a spine to kick Clive out, as it will only lead her to more trouble. In some ways, I do wish I could rebuild a relationship with her. She is the last living link to my grandfather and grandmother, as well as my mother's only living sibling. But I know I could never trust her, never not see that face and the spitefulness that she had for me and my family, that she chose money, or what she thought was money, over us. And I don't think I can forgive that. But I'm not going to go out of my way to do her more harm. I'm just happy that I'm in a better place now. Wow, the karma had it good here. I hope you understand why this story is my favorite in this subreddit. Because it has all of the amazing elements. Huge sums of money that people lose, family drama, etc. Anyway, I hope that you loved it too. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, because I really want to get to 150 subscribers as soon as possible. Karen in a prayer group. What should I do? I just joined a new church and been there for some weeks. I joined a prayer group, which meets 2 times per week, and it is very small, like 5 of us, hosted by volunteers. It's a non-denominational church. There is a Karen type of lady who I am noticing keeps upping me and throws subs. Today we had to do prayer requests, and my request was to pray for my friend whose mom just recently passed. Also, my prayer report was that I was happy to see my niece graduate from high school and that I hope that everyone has had a happy Memorial Day weekend. After it was my turn, she yawns obnoxiously loudly and proceeds to contradict everything that I had said. She says it's not a happy Memorial Day, where it is only about mourning, and that I should understand there are students that did not graduate. I understand and I am empathetic what she said, but she constantly is contradicting everything that I say to try to get a rise out of me and to argue in a prayer group setting. How would you interact with a person like this? I would just ignore her, to be honest, because these type of people, they want you to react, and as soon as you stop reacting, they will move on to the next best person. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can also watch that awesome video or this awesome playlist. See you next time!